Today we're going to be learning Sotah Daf Lamed Aleph. This is the Daf for Shabbat. We're going to start at the top of the page, or the very bottom of Lamed Amud Bet, with fetuses singing Shira in Kriyat Yam Suf when the splitting of the sea. Even babies, embryos were singing praise of God. Okay, this is obviously an exaggerated midrash to try to say about how all-encompassing this and how exciting the moment was. How do we know this? Makelot, they say, is when the Jews were congregated together. Where was that? At the splitting of the sea. Hashem mimakor Yisrael, mimakor, they say, is even the ones that were in the makol, which means in utero. To which the Gemara asks, v'halo chazu, but how could they see? Right? Forget about how could they sing and how could anyone hear their singing. But not only can they not talk, but you can't even hear them if they would talk. But the question is, could they even not see? Okay, this is, by the way, in parentheses. Not everybody has this in their version of the Gemara. The womb, kind of the mother's body even became see-through, okay, translucent, and they were able to see through, and with that, they saw what happened. Again, quite an exaggeration. Going back to the Mishna. In the Mishna, on Daf Kaf Zayin Amud Bet, it said that Bo Bayom, in that day, what happened, right? The Bo Bayom that we've been talking about in the Mishnah. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Horkidah said the following: Iyov worshiped God out of love. How do we know this? Because it says, even if you were to kill me, I would still go and beseech God. Okay, or want for God, long for God. And then the Gemara, the Mishnah had said, but it's still not so clear. Do we mean lo ani mitzapeh? Lo in Hebrew with a vav is to him, which is what was written there. To him I am waiting. O ani mitzapeh, or does it mean lo ani achel? If God were to kill me, I would not be looking for God, be wanting to be with God, be waiting for God. So how do we know which one? Talmud Lomar, until I die, I will not take away my belief in God, basically, my tumati, I will be whole with God, in which case that's a different pasuk in a different chapter of Iyov, but the point is, obviously, he didn't leave God. And then they say, from there we learn that he must have done it out of love. Now the Gemara says that, the Mishnah says there, that Rabbi Yehoshua said, who's going to take the dust off your eyes? You said it was all out of fear because it says okay, and basically you're wrong because you're and then it says Yehoshua Talmidcha, the student of your student says Sheme Ahava. So basically it says, isn't it why do you say it's out of fear and not out of love? Now the Gemara is going to deal with this. And the first question of the Gemara is, lohu, lohu. In other words, why is there this question? Did lo mean lo with an aleph or lo with a vav? Why don't we just look at what's written and then we'll know which one it is? If it has an aleph, it means no. If it has a vav, then it means yes, right? To him I will. So it's pretty obvious from the text. Why do you even have to question? To which the Gemara says, what do you mean? What do you mean? You think every time it says Lamed Aleph, it really always means Lamed Aleph? And this is what we call Kri Uchtiv. Sometimes it says Lamed Aleph, but it's read as Lamed Vav. Ela me'ata, look at this pasuk. B'chol tzaratam lo tzal. Ktiv b'Lamed Aleph. Hachinami dilohu. You want to say that, in other words, you're trying to say lo tzal is also with a Lamed Aleph? If you want to say it's with a Lamed Aleph, and then we just rely on what's written, but look at the pasuk. The pasuk says, B'chol tzaratam lo tzal. Umal'ach panav hoshiam ba'ahavato u'b'chemlato hu ga'alam v'yinatzleim v'yinaseim kol yimei olam. The pasuk says that God, first let's explain the pasuk. B'chol tzaratam lo tzal means in all their travails, the Jewish people, God was not unhappy about it. And that seems weird. Right? But maybe it really does mean God was not unhappy. Meaning God didn't care. But the rest of that pasuk says, Umalach panav hoshiem. In other words, it was like an angel. God came to take them to save them. with his love and with his compassion, he redeemed them. And he took them out all the days of the world. So it can't possibly be that he wasn't saddened and struggling with our struggles. Otherwise, why would he have saved us? So Ella, mashmahachi umashmahachi, sometimes lo is actually corrected, and it's not there here. It doesn't mean it's not sal. He wasn't unhappy. He wasn't upset. No, lo tsar means lo to him was upset. He was upset with all of our struggles. So therefore, it really could be some, and that's why the Mishnah had the whole question about time. Now we're going to quote a blank. This is going to explain, which the Mishnah did not explain, what does Rabbi Yehoshua do with the pasuk that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai used, where it said he was a Yirei Elohim. What is Rabbi Yehoshua going to do with it? Well, Tanya Rabbi Meir, it says in the Brayta, the Rabbi Meir says, Ne'amar Yirei Elohim be'Iyov and Ne'amar Yirei Elohim ba'Avraham. We're going to compare Iyov and Avram. Both say they were God-fearing men. Ma Yirei Elohim amor ba'Avraham me'ahava. Just like God-fearing by Avram was out of love. Af Yirei Elohim amor me'Iyov me'ahava. Me'amor be'Iyov me'ahava. Just like by Avram, he was God-fearing, but it really meant out of love. Also by Iyov, it was out of love. Meaning, you could say you're a God-fearing person. It doesn't mean you do it out of fear of sin. It could be you in fear of God. No, you could do it out of love. Now, what they didn't explain was, how do we know Avram was God-fearing really meant out of love? Avram gufei menalan. How do we know it? Dichtiv zera Avraham ohavi. By Avraham, it says in Yeshayahu that he was the zera of Avraham who loved me, was my beloved. So now they want to know, and this is always a big topic in Jewish philosophy, right? Loving or worshiping God out of love is always a higher level than worshiping out of fear, although we will see today that perhaps some people think that it's equal. So what's the difference between someone who does out of love and someone who does out of fear? Like it says in this Brayta, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer, Gadol osemi ava yoter me'osemi yirah. The one who does it out of love is greater than the one who does it out of fear. Shezet taloi la'elef dor, because one gets rewarded up to 1,000 generations. V'zet taloi la'alpayim dor, and the one out of love, and then the one out of fear gets 1,000. The one out of love gets 2,000. How do we know this? Dichtiv, hachaktiv. Here it says la'alafim lo'havai u'l'shomrei mitzvotai. For thousands of generations, which means 2,000, because it's plural, usually the minimum plural at least is 2,000, la'ohavai, for those who love me and keep my mitzvah. And in a different pasuk it says, the ones who keep my mitzvot for 1,000 generations. Now the ones who observe my mitzvot, the assumption is they're observing them out of fear. And they get only 1,000. For which the Gemara says, what are you talking about? Hatam nami ktiv, you didn't read that whole pasuk. It says, there it also said those who love God get 1,000 generations. And the Gemara doesn't point this out, but the first pasuk said, we say Shomrei mitzvot to those who do it out of fear. In the pasuk about 2,000 generations, it also said both categories of people. To which they answer, notice in the first pasuk, it says, la'alafim lo'avai, and only after that it says Shomrei mitzvotai. So the 2,000 is juxtaposed to the ones who love God. And in the pasuk about the 1,000 generations, it said lo'avai, lo'avav, u'l'shomrei mitzvotav le'elef dor. The shomrei mitzvot was next to, juxtaposed to the elef dor. And that's why each one, yes, it says the same thing, right? Different amounts of time with the same descriptions, but it's a matter of which one was juxtaposed to which, to the reward. We're going to end this chapter with a story. Two students sat before Rav. They both come and tell them what they're dreaming. So one says, I heard in my dream, someone read me a pasuk. How great is how large is the goodness that God bestows on those who fear him. The other one said, they told me in a dream, they will be happy with you, all those who stick to God will always be singing your praises. And they'll be happy with you, those who love your name. So Amar Lahu, Rabbi says to them, Travaichu Rabbanan Tzadikei Gemurei. You're both Tzadikim Gemurim, you're real righteous people. Atun, you both are. Mar me'ava, mar me'yira. Just you do it out of love and you do it out of fear. Okay, he seems to not really differentiate, even though until now the whole sugya differentiated, but maybe still there's tzadikim kumulim, just one's on a higher level than the other. With that, Hadron alach kashem shamayim, finishing the 5th chapter. Starting chapter 6, and in fact, tomorrow's class we will finish chapter 6, the very, very short parak. I didn't check, but it's possibly one of the shortest parak in Shas. I don't know. Someone can check that out. Misha kinei li'ishto v'nistera. There's a bit of a lack of clarification about the beginning of this Mishnah. First 4 words are understandable. Someone who does kinoi, and then she was, right, he warns, then she was alone with a man. Immediately Tosfot says, this is really a subject for the 1st chapter. And in fact, we're going to see a huge repeat from the 1st chapter. It's not exactly clear why this is here. Even if he heard, now heard what? This is where there's a lack of clarity. Some people say heard that there was stira, that's Rashi. Even if he heard about the fact that she was in a room alone with a man without really witnesses, but from a bird flying overhead. Now, what does that mean? Either it's just likely it's just an exaggeration. It means an unsubstantiated rumor. Or some people say it actually means a parrot. So what does a parrot do? Repeats things they heard from other people. So the parrot repeated word for word someone who said this woman was alone in the room with a man. Maybe that's what it means. I don't think that's the pshat, but it is interesting. And some people say that maybe they heard 3rd stage. Remember, there's kinoi, stira, and then it's possible 3rd stage, which is they actually saw what transpired in the room. And maybe that's what he's talking about, that even if they were talking about what happened in the room was just based on rumor, then again, she wouldn't drink the Sotah waters and he would divorce her, but perhaps he would, right? Why he gives her the ketubah is actually a good question in that case, right? So they say it's because stira doesn't need ejud, afilu eved, right? It would have to work, that would work better with the stira was not substantiated. And without substantial testimony for the stira, then you don't get, she actually still gets her ketubah, she doesn't lose her rights. Rabbi Yehoshua Omer, we saw this before. Rabbi Yehoshua says it's the women who are spinning their thread at night, and they talk about all the things that go on. And if you hear it there, then it's already more substantiated rumor. But if you don't even hear it there, then it's nothing. Amal ed echad ani re'iti shenitmet. Now we get directly to the Tumah. If we didn't mention it before, again, it's a little unclear, but let's just go with Rashi that we were talking before about the stira. Well, what if we have stira, we have the kinoi, we have the stira, and she's supposed to drink the Sotah water. But one witness says, I saw what happened in the room. She really slept with him, in which case there's no doubt, because we believe one witness, and therefore lo atashota. Why we believe one witness, we're going to deal with that further on. Even if it's a Gentile slave or maidservant, we're going to believe them. Generally, we don't accept witnesses for this, but they're believed even to disqualify her from getting her ketubah, and she can't drink the Sotah waters and can't prove her innocence. Chamota ubat chamota, her mother-in-law, the daughter of her mother-in-law, Sarata, right, the daughter of her mother-in-law is basically her sister-in-law. Sarata is the second wife of her husband. Yivimta is the Yivama of her husband. Ubat Balan, the daughter of her husband. Okay, well, not through her, obviously. Even though, if you might remember from Yivamot, these are women that are suspicious anyway, not always, but they often might have a chip to, on their shoulder about her. They might hate her. They might want to deprive her of all sorts of things because they're jealous of her. Well, Hare Elu Ne'emano. They're believed in this case as well, to say that she was sleeping with the man. However, they can't cause her financial loss because they are in doubt whether they're really telling the truth and they really just are trying to get her. But they can prevent her from drinking the water to prove her innocence. Shayabadi. Now we're going to talk about why one witness is accepted, and theoretically you would have thought it's not. Why? Umay meidut rishonan. This we saw word for word. It was quoted earlier in the Masechet. Just like the stira, the edut rishona is the first testimony. It's not really the first. The first is the warning, but the warning is not really testimony. The stira is testimony that she did something. If edut rishona, the stira, which doesn't forbid her forever, because theoretically she could prove her innocence with the Sotah water, and yet you need 2 witnesses. Edut achrona, to prove that she actually slept with him, which is a later stage, and not because it's a later stage, but it is just the achrona, she'osarta isur olam, that forbids her forever, because then she's clearly a zona. Is it not going to be the case that you need at least two? In other words, the stira has much less ramification. The ramifications are forever, because she'll never be able to go back to her husband if they say she actually slept with him. In which case, you would think you would also need two witnesses. Talmud lamar ve'ed ein ba, kol edut sheyesh ba. This is learned from the pasuk ve'ed ein ba, and this is v'hi nitma'a ve'ed ein ba v'hi lo nitpasa. Right? If she was nitma'a, meaning, and there aren't, we learned already, but we'll see this inside later. Eid ein ba means there weren't two witnesses, meaning there was only one. V'hi lo nitpasa, and she wasn't raped. Then, right, she's nitma'a. That puts her in a category of being nitma'a. Okay, if she wasn't raped and there was one witness to prove she was nitma'a, that would make her guilty, right? And then she'd be forbidden to her husband forever. So what do we learn from here, right? Kol edut sheyesh ba. Any witness would actually end up convicting her, because eid ein ba, if you don't have, right, v'hi lo nitpasa, then right, v'hi nitma'a be'eid ein ba. Okay, there aren't two, there's one only, and that's enough to forbid her. So now they say, okay, so we would have thought to learn from a kal v'chomer from eidei stira, but we don't because of the drashaf and the pasuk. Well, if that's the case, once we have the drashaf and the pasuk, why don't we do a kal v'chomer le'edut rishona me'ata? Why don't we do the reverse kal v'chomer and say the following? And now we're going to turn to Amud Bet, to the second side. Uma im edut achrona she'osarta isur olam. If the later edut of the tuma, which forbids her forever, and yet harei mitkayem be'ed echad, which we learned out from the pasuk, edut harishona she'eino osarta isur olam, then the earlier testimony, which doesn't even forbid her forever and is much lighter, eino din she'tkayem be'ed echad, is it not enough that it be with one witness? From here we learn ki matzah be'ervat aval. Because we have a pasuk that says, this is in the divorce case, if he finds some sort of erva, right, problematic behavior in a sexual manner, ula halanu omer, and there it says daval. We're going to have a gzera shava, another place where it says daval. Al pishnayim edim yakum daval. Mala, okay, based on two witnesses' testimony is how you establish something. Mala, and there it says davar also. Mala halan al pishnayim, afkan pishnayim. Since that's two, this is two as well. When we get to the Gemara is going to say that actually doesn't prove what we're trying to have it prove. But right now, it sounds like that's proving why we need two witnesses for the Eidei Stira. And you can't learn it from the Eidei Tumah. It's enough to have one. Also, the Eidei Stira would be enough to have one. No, the Eidei Stira comes under Erva and it needs two witnesses. So would theoretically the Tumah, but there's a special drasha to teach no. However, we're going to see soon that it's not the case. It's really learned from somewhere else, and this pasuk is actually teaching us a different law. But that's only when we get to the Gemara. Now we're going to have four cases. We're going to have one witness against one witness, and then we're going to have one against two, or two against one. What if one witness says she slept with the man, we saw, and one witness says no, we saw also, and she did not sleep with the man? Or isha omeret nitmeit, v'isha omeret lo nitmeit, or a woman said nitmeit, and another woman said lo nitmeit. Either which way, one against one, what do we say? All that kind of falls to the side. And right, this is what you call a dura kasha. They cancel each other out. And we're left with the basic case where we don't know what this woman did. We have kino, we have stira. She goes and drinks the Sotah waters. What if echad omer nitmeit, v'shnayim omrim lo nitmeit? So one said she's impure. She slept with the man. And then two say she didn't. Hayta Sotah. Since one said nitmeit, even though we have two said no, right, we're still left with lack of clarity here, and she's going to drink the waters. But if shnayim omrim nitmeit, if we already have two witnesses that she was nitmeit, two witnesses seals the deal. Echad omer lo nitmeit, one said no, lo hayta shotah. She doesn't drink the Sotah waters because we have two witnesses that she was nitmeit. Right? In the previous case, we had two that said she wasn't nitmeit. So we really go by the two witnesses that say no, even though, right? Well, now we don't know because they say she wasn't, but we still have the fact that she did kinoing stira, and therefore she would still drink the water. So now the Gemara says, first going back to this ervat davar, Hi, Talmud Lomar, ki matzah be'ervat taval. Why did they use that to prove that you need two witnesses for the stira? Talmud ba v'lo b'kinoi, ba v'lo b'stira. Why don't we use this other drasha, which we actually learned in the beginning of the Masechet, which is eid ein ba, where we learned about the one witness. Eid ein ba, ba is always an exclusive word. It's saying just here for the tumah, but not for the kinoi and not for the stira. For those, you need two witnesses. Remember, there was a machloket about whether you need two for the kinoi, but for sure for the stira. So why did, when we asked in the Mishna the question about the stira, we should say it's because of ba v'lo b'kinoi, ba v'lo b'stira, and not because of ki matzah be'ervat taval. So, to which they say, right, ba v'lo b'stira mibayle, it should have said. To which they answer, achinami kamal. That really is what it says here. Talmud Lomar, okay, it didn't say it, but what do we mean? Edit the Mishnah. Okay, the Amoraim had the authority to sometimes say there's words missing from this Mishnah, especially as they were passed down orally. That would happen sometimes. So they said, you should say, add those words. It should really say, ba v'lo b'kinoi, ba v'lo b'stira. And then, what's the ervat taval? You can't just erase it. I mean, you could theoretically, but it would be weird. So they say, that's coming to answer a different question. Until now, we've been talking about witnesses come and say, or one witness comes and says, after we had the kinoi and the stira, and she was alone with the man in a room that he warned her not to be with. And then the witnesses say, one witness comes and says, and we'll learn later, it could even be a non-kosher witness. Usually a non-acceptable witness could be a relative, could be a woman. Woman's testimony wasn't generally accepted. For this, we accept it. Even we saw an eved or a shikha, maid or a slave. Well, what if that's only because, why do we believe one witness? First, the Torah says so, but because we also already have the kinoi and we have the stira. We know she was in the room alone with the man with witnesses. So it's just a matter of what happened in the room. One witness is enough. But what if tuma ba'alma below kinoi, below stira, but how do we know that if we just have witnesses that came and said, I saw this woman alone in a room with a man, we need two witnesses to do anything. If it was just one witness, it's useless. That's if it has no basis of kinoi and stira. So how do we know that to talk about tuma in general wouldn't work with eid echad? And that's because that's ervat taval. That's generally testifying that this woman has slept with someone else without any other basis. Nemar kan davar, v'nemar lan davar, mahalam b'shnei edim, av kam b'shnei edim. Then we learn it from Gzeira Shava, from davar davar. Eid omer nitzmei. Now, and then the other one said, lo nitzmei. What do we say? She drinks the Sotah waters because they contradict each other. And we're left with our question, right? She has kinoi, she has stira, we make her drink the waters. So now they say, Tama de kamach kishla. It's only because they contradicted each other. Halo kamach kishla. If they didn't, what would we say? Ed echad mehiman. Otherwise, seems like if we just have one witness, ed echad would work. That's really what the Mishna said. You don't need to derive it from here. You could really derive it from, it said it explicitly in the Mishna. So some people ask, it's a little bit strange. But anyways, they want to know, how do we know ed echad is believed when it's not contradicted? Ditanu Rabbanit, as it says in a bright. Ve'eid ein ba, b'shnayim ha'katuv medaber. It says eid ein ba, it means there aren't two witnesses, but there's only one, and one is enough to convict her, right? And not to allow her to drink the Sotah waters. And it's convict in the sense that he divorces her, she loses her ketubah. So, and we can't continue with the Sotah process to allow her to prove her innocent. So now they say, why do you assume eid ein ba means two witnesses aren't there, but one is? Maybe it means there's not one witness there. So how do we know? Talmud Loma lo yakum ed echad b'ish. Says you can't have, this is a totally different context. You can't have one witness come to court, okay, to testify against someone. Now, there's a problem with that pasuk, and you might remember this. We saw this exact rasha in the beginning of the Masechet. Mimashma shenemar lo yakum ed ein yodeh shu echad. It says you shouldn't have a witness to. A witness can't testify. A witness means one witness. So, matam lomer echad. You don't need the word echad. Why did the word echad appear there? Zeh bana'av. This built a paradigm. Kol makom shneimar eid, harei kan shnayim, ad shifro lecha katuv echad. Anytime it says eid, it means two, unless the Torah says eid echad. From there we learned, only when it says eid echad does it mean one witness. That means eid by us means two witnesses. And that's how we got to eidim ein ba, right? But there is one witness. If there is one witness, then she doesn't drink the Sotah waters. But Amar Rachmana, and that's what they're going to say right now. Shrei leitba elachad, meaning there aren't two witnesses, there's only one. V'hi lo nitpasa, and if she wasn't raped, because if she was raped, it's not her fault. But if she wasn't raped, asura, then she's forbidden. Now they ask the last big question for today. Now, they say the following, very interesting. If one aid is believed to say nitmeit, so when one witness says nitmeit, and then the other one says lo nitmeit, what should happen there? Well, why do we believe the second one to contradict the first? Why not? Well, ha'amar Ulla says, kol makom she'emina Torah eid echad, harei kan shnayim. Once the Torah, in any case where the Torah says one witness is believed, like two, well, it's as if there's two witnesses. So when the Mishna said that one witness says she's impure, meaning she slept with the guy, and the other one says no, and we call this contradictory evidence and throw it out of court, it doesn't make any sense. Because when we say the first one's believed, the first one is believed as if it's two witnesses. And then there's only one witness standing up against that witness. So it's as if there's two in the beginning, and one against two shouldn't stand any ground. So how does that work? Therefore, Ela Amar Ulla says, Tani, again, second time for today, we're changing the words in the Mishnah, Lo Haita Sotah. If one says nitmeit, it's considered like two. And when one more comes and says lo nitmeit, we don't believe that second witness because it contradicted the first already is two, even though it was really only one. One counts as two. So in that case, we have basically two witnesses. It's as if we have two witnesses that she slept with the guy and there's no Sotah waters to be drunk. And that goes against our Mishnah, but he says change the words of the Mishnah. Instead of Sotah, it should be Eino Sotah. And Rabbi Yitzchak says also change it, just like Ulla said. Rabbi Chiya gives a different answer. Rabbi Chiya amar Haita Sotah. He says no, she drinks. Rabbi Chiya kasha de Ulla. So Rabbi Chiya, how does he explain that whole idea that Ulla said that once one is believed, one is like two, and then someone comes after, they can't contradict that testimony of two. Lo kasha, kam bevat achat, kam bezer chazin. Rabbi Chiya will explain it really depends how the testimony went about. If they both come at the exact same time and speak together, one says she was nitma, the other says she wasn't nitma, then that's contradictory evidence. But when's Ulla going to be true? When the first one came first, and only later did the second one come. Then the first one's already like two, and then we don't accept the testimony of the second one to be up against it. Because again, just to be clear here, to say nitmeit, we believe two. To say lo nitmeit, we believe one is two. But when you say lo nitmeit, she wasn't, nothing happened. We don't say there we believe one person. No. So we end up saying that if it's bevat achat, then one is believed they can contradict each other. If one came first and said nitmeit first, then they're believed like two, and then the one doesn't stand any ground. Tana. But now we have a question against Rabbi Chiya from the Mishnah. Later in the Mishnah, where there were the first two cases, which is really one and the same. It's just if it's a person or a man or a woman who says nitmeit, and the other one says lo nitmeit. But then the Mishnah gave another two cases. Eid omer nitmeit, ushnayim omrim lo nitmeit, haita shotah. If one said nitmeit and then two say lo nitmeit, she would drink the waters. Now that would seem to imply, because it gives the case of one saying nitmeit and then two saying lo nitmeit, she would drink the waters. That seems to imply ha chad vechad lo haita shotah. But if it's only one against one, then it would seem like she doesn't drink. And that's a tiyuf to do Rabbi Chiya, because what did Rabbi Chiya say? If it's one against one, if they come at the same time, they contradict and she would drink. So this seems to imply the opposite. This would assume that you make that implication, if you imply that. Well, the Gemara to say, of course you can't imply that, because if you're going to say, case number 3 in the Mishnah, one says nitmeit and two say lo nitmeit, she drinks, and the inference is if it were 1 and 1, she wouldn't drink. Well, you would come to the exact opposite conclusion from an inference from the last line of the Mishnah, which is shnayim omrim nitmeit, two say she was impure, ve'echad omer lo nitmeit, and one says she's not impure, lo haita shotah, she wouldn't drink. Now the inference of there would be, right, 2 versus 1, which would then imply 1 versus 1. What would you say? It would have to be the opposite. So from line 3, case 3, we infer if it was 1 and 1, she wouldn't drink. From case 4, we infer if it was 1 and 1, she would drink. So obviously, you can't infer that. Obviously, the last 2 cases are not there for that inference. So what are those last 2 cases there for? So we're going to have 2 explanations, both saying it holds like Rabbi Nechemia. It's just going to be 2 different options by how we understand Rabbi Nechemia. We're going to learn one today and one tomorrow. Well, we're going to say, the last 2 cases are coming to talk about what if the witnesses were disqualified from being witnesses. They were disqualified witnesses that aren't generally accepted in court. Well, what did Rabbi Nechemia say? The time, Rabbi Nechemia, and this Mishna follows Rabbi Nechemia. As it says in a Braita, Rabbi Nechemia Omer, Kol makom she'emina Torah ed echad, halach achar rov deo. Anytime the Torah believes one witness, you can believe any witnesses, okay? And we follow it goes by numbers. And normally 2 kosher witnesses, in a case where you take kosher witnesses only, 2 witnesses are equal to 100 witnesses. It's not a numbers game. But in the case of a case where we don't need to accept only kosher witnesses and we can have other witnesses, then it becomes a numbers game. So what Rabbi Nechemia says is, Asu shtei anashim b'ish echad kishnei anashim b'ish echad. They made 2 women against 1 man the same as 2 men against 1 woman. You might have thought that 2 women is only equal to 1 man when it comes to testimony. But in a case where we accept anyone to be a witness, women are considered just like men in terms of the numbers. And it becomes, again, there's 2 issues. Number 1, that a woman has the exact same koach as a man in terms of her potential to testify, and that we're going to go by numbers. So in these cases where there's 1 against 2, even if it's 2 women against 1 man, we're going to always follow the 2 because it goes by the majority. Okay, that's what Rabbi Nechemia is coming to say. These cases are teaching, and they're not coming to teach us that inference that they thought, which didn't make any sense, which was a problem with Rabbi Chiya, and also in and of itself, though, created this contradiction. Therefore, we're going to say it doesn't come to teach us that, it comes to teach us something new, which is Rabbi Nechemia. What we're going to see next time is there's an additional case of Rabbi Nechemia, that a different explanation of how to understand Rabbi Nechemia, which will also be a possible answer to the question that we asked. With that, we'll finish for today. Wishing everyone a Shabbat Shalom.